Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon. When you spend your whole life reading only the great classic novels or dense works of philosophy, is an architect who designs a cathedral better than an architect who designs a low-cost little house? Well, in classical music, at least in certain circles nowadays, there persists an idea that the alpha and omega of music are the great forms, and that a composer cannot be great if he does not dedicate himself to the symphony, to the sonata, to writing fugues or great sacred works. This puts our composer of the month, Isaac Albéniz, in a very strange position. Aniello Desiderio and Zoran Dukic, the duo who are playing Rumores de la Caleta by Isaac Albéniz, a disc released by Guitar Co-op called Live in Koblenz. The very definition of what is classical carries the concept of what is exemplary, of what is a reference for what comes after. Teaching of musical composition is based, on the one hand, on the teaching of harmony and counterpoint. These are two almost scientific disciplines. On the other hand, the study of musical forms, and that is where the problem begins. Much musical theory is written in German, French, or English, because it's obvious that when talking about sonatas, formal growth, development, etc., Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, they are exemplary. What is considered exemplary belongs to a very restricted realm of Austro-German works, which, to tell the truth, were an exception in their time because French or Italian composers didn't write music like that. The legendary duo Abreu playing Evocación by Albéniz, a transcription for two guitars that is part of their album that has been released by Guitar Co-op. And you can hear this track in the playlist that accompanies this episode, and you can access through the description in your platform. The idea of epic composition persists and tends to be used as a yardstick for everything. We fail to take into account that the ability to seduce the listener with a rhythm, with a breathtaking melody, to evoke atmospheres, to illustrate situations, to capture fleeting feelings, or even to explore the virtuosity is also appreciable musical value, which reflects the genius of the composer as well. If I mention a composer I like very much, He is one of the most learned in all history, and he was born in exactly the same year as Albéniz, but his musical opposite, Mahler. He wrote some of the densest and most extreme symphonies in history, but he never wrote a short, dance-like piece that had some swing and charm. This is El Albaicín from the suite Iberia by Isaac Albéniz, here performed by Jorge Caballero in his own transcription, part of his album Albéniz, released by GuitarCoop. Musical charm is a subjective quality. It depends on empathy. It depends often on gesture, on the way the music is played. It's a kind of musical skin touch contact. Another very subjective quality is evocative power. Music that transports us to a landscape, to an imaginary world. It makes us miss a place we haven't visited. It makes us feel like we know someone we've never seen. These are probably the two greatest qualities, and for which we don't have a yardstick, of Isaac Albéniz. Here, Andrés Segovia playing his own transcription of Albéniz Sevilla, which was first transcribed by Francisco Tárrega. Albéniz had a very strong quality if placed in a historical context. He is the voice of a nation. Perhaps not in all his works, but certainly his piano works, he gave a voice in classical music to Spain. Spaniards recognize themselves in his music. They look at him as one observes their best qualities when looking in a mirror. When we play Albéniz in concert in Spain, the feeling of gratitude is palpable. And he didn't achieve this through intuition alone. There is a technique, there is a kind of strength that is inherent to the composition that accomplish this goal. Jorge Caballero playing by Albéniz, Sous les palmiers, Under the Palm Tree, part of his album released by GuitarCoop. Albéniz's biography is as colorful as a Technicolor film from the 1940s. He was born in Camprodon, in the province of Gerona, on the 29th of May, 1860, meaning that although his music is always associated with Andalusia, he was in fact Catalan, which is altogether a different nationality. His hometown today has fewer than 3,000 people and is a center for gastronomic tourism. His father was a customs official. His mother died when he was a child, and he had three sisters. Apparently, the eldest of them was his piano teacher. He was a child prodigy, and it is said that he gave his first concert at age 4. It also seems that at age 7, his father took him to Paris. He was approved in the exams to study at the conservatory, but he was rejected for being too young. Jorge Caballero playing Oriental, part of his disc Albéniz, released by GuitarCoop, that you can hear in the playlist that you can access in the description to this episode in your favorite platform. At age 9, he moved with his family to Madrid to attend the conservatory, and his father began taking him, alongside with his sister Clementina, on tours around Spain. Here, the fog of legend begins. Most early biographies said that little Isaac was rebellious and ran away from home several times, going to El Escorial, and at age 12, he went to play on a ship bound for Buenos Aires. Because of this, he supposedly played in cabaret or even in the boat itself and similar venues in Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Puerto Rico, and Cuba, where he was allegedly apprehended and taken to Havana to reunite with his father. Well, this is legend, but the facts are just as legendary. He really did visit all these places as a child, not to mention New York, San Francisco, London, Liverpool, and Leipzig. But all of that he did with his father, who we shouldn't forget, he was a customs agent, and in such capacity, he traveled to work. This is evidenced by comparing the dates of Albéniz's concerts in the Americas with his father's itineraries. In fact, his father probably planned the trips very, very carefully. At 15, Albéniz already knew the world. That's me, Fabio Zanon, playing Sambra Granadina by Albéniz, part of my album Spanish Music, that is a GuitarCoop release. At the time, Albéniz went to live in Brussels to study at the Royal Conservatoire with a scholarship granted by the personal secretary to the King Alfonso XII, was the Count of Morphy. Another myth says that he studied with Franz Liszt in Budapest, but this did not happen. but it's still very, very plausible that the two artists at least met each other. Albéniz was already demonstrating his talent as a composer for a subgenre of classical music. Salon music, light music. This is a type of music that is easier to despise than to make. In theory, anyone can write a little waltz or a choro for piano, music to be played in a cafe, a brothel, a tavern, where people chat and drink. It's quite another thing to be a Scott Joplin, to be an Ernesto Nazareth, or to be the young Albéniz and compose simple, perhaps frivolous, but charming music that is still worth listening to 150 years on. This is Pavana Capriccio by Isaac Albéniz, played by myself, Fabio Zanon, on a GuitarCoop album called Spanish Music. You can hear the full album in our platform too. He returned to Spain, where he increasingly included his own works in his concerts and became involved as a conductor with a zarzuela company, that is, musical theater, sung in Spanish. The first turning point in his life as a composer came at age 23 when he met in Barcelona a figure that should be better known because he's a capital developer of Spanish music, the composer Felipe Pedrell. We are listening to Oriental by Philippe Pedrell, played here by Krzysztof Ścipulkowski. Pedrell had a strong inclination towards musicology. He's responsible for the rescue of ancient Spanish sacred music. But his mission in life was the creation of a national style of Spanish composition, which would rekindle the glory he saw in Renaissance Spain. He paved the way for the creation of this language through the works of his numerous students and protégés, among them Granados, Manuel de Falla, Turina, and Roberto Gerard. Later, I will talk a bit about what the Spanish identity is. Jorge Caballero playing Seguidillas by Albéniz. In the same year, Albéniz married Rosina Lagarriga, with whom he had two children. His son Alfonso would later become a football player for Barcelona and later a diplomat. His daughter Laura was a well-known illustrator. His descendants have a presence in modern Spain as well, with a great nephew as a mayor of Madrid. But getting back to the point, what is usually considered the peak of his career is the beginning of the 1890s when he toured as a pianist and composer throughout Europe and lived in Paris and London. London is another episode of legend. At that time, musical theatre, including the comedies by Gilbert and Sullivan, were at their peak. Albéniz wrote music for some of these comedies and caught the attention of a member in the audience, the Baron Francis Money Coates. What to expect from a guy who has money in his surname? It's worth remembering that Coates is still today one of the oldest banks still in operation, part of the NatWest and Royal Bank of Scotland conglomerate. They also have a strong presence in Switzerland, the Middle East, and Hong Kong. In the last 10 years, they have experienced some sort of decline. Baron Francis Money Coates was not only a banker but also a poet. This completely changed Albéniz's life. He simply hired Albéniz for high sums to write operas based on his librettos. Albéniz managed to finish Henry Clifford, Pepita Jimenez, and Merlin, which was supposed to be part of a trilogy of King Arthur legends. But the next two operas, Lancelot and Guinevere, were not finished. They are little known and somewhat bizarre works because Spanish elements are used within a somewhat medieval atmosphere. This is the intermezzo from Pepita Jimenez by Albéniz. In real life, Coates' commissions allow Albéniz to live comfortably for the rest of his life, but he occupied a decade of his life with works for musical theatre that today have very little circulation. In 1898, he moved to Paris, where his music was greatly admired. His residence was a meeting point for Spanish musicians such as Manuel de Falla and Turina. At that time, after his experience with musical theatre and vocal music, his piano music entered a new phase. I will talk about this shortly. Unfortunately, Albéniz suffered from Bright's disease, a chronic kidney disease that caused his health to decline until his death in 1909, aged 48. His last years were dedicated to composing his greatest piano work, the suite Iberia. Pianist Alicia de la Rocha playing Rondeña by Isaac Albéniz from Suite Iberia. A few days before his death, Albéniz received a visit from his most special compatriot, Henrique Granados. Granados played with great emotion his piece called Mallorca, as a reminder of a visit both of them had done to the Mediterranean island. Posthumously, Albéniz also received the Légion d'honneur from the French government at the request of his fellow composers Debussy and Fauré. Zoran Dukic and Aniello Desiderio playing Mallorca by Albéniz on two guitars. There's always a tendency to divide the works of composers into three phases, as we have done with Beethoven. With Albéniz, I think this doesn't work. He has two very clear phases. Albéniz's salon music does not survive bureaucratic interpretations. It's music of charm, of imagination, delicacy, of gesture, of lively rhythm that cannot be rushed. There are some recordings that don't do much of a service to these pieces, but that is what we guitarists can offer. It's a field where the guitar sounds at its best and can be explored a lot in new transcriptions. This is Minuet to Silvia by Isaac Albéniz, played by myself, Fabio Zanon, on an album released by GuitarCoop, Spanish Music. The encounter with Pedrell sparked in Albéniz the need to give a national identity to his music, something that was not a concern during his youth. Miguel Baselga playing Albéniz, there are two ways to make music sound national. The one is to adopt elements of folk music. The other is to sing praise to the landscape and to what the country has that is unique. It's a kind of illustrative way. Albéniz does both. Much of his music adopts what is specific to Andalusian folklore from southern Spain. There are two reasons for this. One is the symbolic weight. Andalusia is the melting pot of cultures where Christian culture met Arab and Jewish cultures, and they were able to live harmoniously for a while during the Caliphate of Cordoba in the Middle Ages. All of this is present in the first works of Albéniz's new phase, composed around age 26 to 30, like the first Spanish suite, Recuerdos de Viaje, and Piezas Características. It's easy to identify. Almost all of them have a title describing some place in Spain. It could be on the beach, in the Alhambra, Puerta de Tierra, or Cádiz, Granada, or Torre Bermeja, which is one of the towers at the Alhambra Palace. This is myself, Fabio Zanon, playing Torre Bermeja by Isaac Albéniz in my album Spanish Music, released by GuitarCoop. The musical elements are many. First, there's the imitation of cante hondo, the deep singing that is highly ornamental and of a kind of Arab Andalusian style adopted by the gypsies and the flamenco singers, and this adoption of this stunning rhythmic variety of Spanish dances from the Catalan corranda to the Basque zorzico, encompassing the entire range of Castilian and Andalusian rhythms such as sevillanas, tangos, soleares, bulerías, and the samba atmosphere of the tarantas and the mineras. Albéniz also incorporates the specific harmonic language of the Andalusian guitar and discovers a way to make the piano imitate the sounds of guitars and castanets. This makes the music, when transcribed for the guitar, sound as though it's being returned to its original locus. That is a whole other chapter in the history of Albéniz's music. By Isaac Albéniz, Córdoba, played by Jorge Caballero. Córdoba, incidentally, is one of the many pieces in which the Arab world is represented by an Oriental style and the Christian component by a kind of writing that imitates a choral or church bells, and they are put into friction against each other. The fact is that much of this music is better known in guitar versions rather than the original. GuitarCoop has at least 2 albums dedicated to his music. The story begins with Francisco Tárrega and his arrangements of Granada, Sevilla, Cádiz, and Pavana Capriccio. There are records that Albéniz heard and approved of these arrangements. After Albéniz's death, Llobet transcribed Torre Bermeja and several works for 2 guitars. And finally, Andrés Segovia won over many listeners to the guitar with his transcription of Asturias Leyenda. Albéniz, the prelude Asturias or Leyenda, played by myself, Fabio Zanon, on the record Spanish Music. More recently, guitarists such as Carles Trepat and Jorge Caballero have faced the challenge of transcribing the works from Albéniz's later period, especially those belonging to the complex suite Iberia. Jorge Caballero playing Malaga from the suite Iberia. Duos, trios, and quartets attempt to preserve a great density in these arrangements, preserving the content of these works. The Brazilian Guitar Quartet recorded an album with all the works of Suite Iberia. It's a full album of Iberia. It's a great discographic achievement. Brazilian Guitar Quartet playing by Albéniz, Lavapiés, part of the suite Iberia. You can hear this track in the playlist that we have prepared for you, and you can access in the description to this episode. For me, Albéniz's maturity begins with a piece called La Vega. Great pianist Marc-André Hamelin playing La Vega by Albéniz. From this work culminating in Iberia, we have everything that characterizes Albéniz's late style, beginning with the rhythm, the 3-against-2 that we hear in El Puerto. The next idea is the obstinate repetition of a rhythmic cell. This hypnotic repetition gradually illuminates or is illuminated with a more defined melodic profile. These ideas fight each other until they enter a kind of whirlwind or collapse, in this case with the use of a whole tone scale, reaching a dissonant climax. climax dissolves like waking from a dream. Then he has a moment of reflection. That is almost an attempt to rescue that dream, and the ending is like a shrug. It's a beautiful psychological format that he also adopts for most of the pieces in the Iberia collection, including El Albaicín, Rondeña, Málaga, Eritraña, and so on. There are two even more important things. Albéniz understood the harmonic revolution of the French composers, especially Debussy and Fauré. His music becomes pianistically denser. The harmonies are more ambiguous, hesitant, and otherworldly. That creates a new awareness of the self of the composer and the listener as well. A piece like El Puerto is not only a postcard of the port of Cadiz, it is the consciousness of the artist hovering from a non-localized point of view, observing himself or herself observing, modulating his own feelings and memories as he strolls through the hustle and bustle of Spanish streets and landscapes. In this capacity for self-observation, Albéniz joins geniuses like Marcel Proust or César Franck and brings music to a new dimension, which fortunately we can also appreciate on the guitar. And with Julian Brain playing Cádiz, I want to acknowledge the technical works of Henrique Caldas and the general management by Monicky Zaczéski. I hope you have enjoyed this episode and have a look as well at the previous ones and follow us for the next ones. Thank you very much. Bye. Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon.